Alrighty, so today we're gonna look at the Houston Dynamo in the Moving Forward series episode, and I believe they're the last team that I'm gonna talk about that got eliminated in round number one. And from now on, we're gonna get ready to talk about teams that got eliminated in the second round, and we're one step closer when it comes to finishing up this series. And I'm hoping I can finish up this series as soon as either next week or the week after, because I gotta start doing the season preview, knowing that there are gonna be teams that are gonna start reporting the training camp, and we're going to get ready for the start of the preseason. And before you know it, the beginning of the 2025 MLS season is going to be upon us. But that being said, for the Houston Dynamo, obviously, we knew last year that we're going to take a step back. I mean, especially after they really didn't make any investment into the team, and kind of shown a little flash of the frustration that Dynamo fans has had with this team in the past of not reinvesting in the team when the team is doing well. We knew that they were going to hit a bit of a regression, and we always talk about when teams made a Cinderella run like the Dynamo did last year, made it all the way to the Western Conference Final. It's always hard to replicate that, and what lo and behold, we're seeing it again here with them getting eliminated in the first round. Though I will say that the first round opponent that they play really couldn't be a worse opponent that they could have faced in the first round. That is the Seattle Sounders, who over the years has simply dominated them in terms of the all-time series. With that being said, they did still finish with a respectable 15-9-10 record and finished with 54 points. They only scored 47 goals this season. Goal scoring was definitely a problem at time this season for the Dynamo, and mainly because they really don't have like a difference maker in terms of the goal scoring, and the fact that Hector Herrera was kind of out for most of the season, and we'll talk about how it kind of eventually ended in a very disappointing way in his tenure with the Dynamo. But they do have one of the best goal allowed record in the league with 39 goals conceded. They were one of the better defensive team in the Western Conference, and they have a goal differential of +8. They finished fifth in the Western Conference, but unfortunately they got eliminated by the Seattle Sounder in the first round. Now, previous season, that was the first time that the Dynamo had made it into playoffs, or what seems like for a while. They were one of the team that had one of the longest active playoff drought that any team has had, but they made it to the playoff finally with a fourth place finish with a 14-9-11 record and finished with 51 points, but they unfortunately lost to LAFC in the Western Conference Final. But the fact that they were able to make it get there is something spectacular. And I mean, I say it's a Cinderella run, but I did say that the Dynamo last season was kind of a dark horse kind of team, and they kind of ride that rhythm all the way to the Western Conference Final. That unfortunately they just simply got defeated by a better team that is LAFC. I mean, we knew last year that LAFC was the team to beat, and well, it turns out nobody were able to beat LAFC in 2023 of representing the Western Conference in MLS Cup. But with that being said, before that, it was nothing but misery for Dynamo fans. They finished 13 with a 10-6-18 record in 2022, finished with 36 points. Obviously, did not make it to the playoffs. And then in 2021, same place, but even worse points total. 6-12-16 is their record, finished with 30 points. Obviously, did not make it to the playoffs. In the COVID short season, they finished that last again. 2021, they of course finished that last. It was the same in 2020 with a 4-9-10 record with 21 points. And then in 2019, it gets a little bit better, but still no playoffs. 10th place finish with 12-4-18 record with 40 points. Now, looking at the top goal scored for this team. So this is where you started to see why this team struggled to score goals, because they really don't have a guy that you could say that is the difference maker of this team. Like when Ali Yoot is your top goal scorer of your team, you have some serious question when it comes to goal scoring and a guy that can score the goals. I mean, this is no disrespect to Ali Yoot, but even though he was the top goal scorer of this season, I still didn't see the growth that some Dynamo fans wish that he could develop heading into this season. But he scored 6 goals, and then Latif Blessing again. If Latif Blessing and even Seba Ferreira is your top three goal scorer along with Aliu, yeah, those are very unlikely a source. I would have thought in the beginning of the season that would be the top goal scorer for this Dynamo team. But yeah, Blessing had 5 goals. Blessing had that really hot streak when he came to the Dynamo, but eventually did kind of cooled off. Seba Pereira with five goals. Really surprised that he got brought back to the Dynamo. Consider it looked like he was on his way out after he got went on loan, but they brought him back, and he is still a DP, and there's no doubt that he's definitely going to go down as one of the more disappointing DP in this league. But then they also got Ezekiel Pont, so who at least picked up the slack a little bit with 5 goals to his name, and then you got Kowalczyk with 4 goals to round up the top five. He was decent, at least in the beginning of the season. Really kind of cooled off in the second half of the season as well. Top assist leader, you got Amin Bassi with 8 assists, followed by Coco Carrasquillo with 7 assists. Then you got Aliu with 5 assists, Artur with 4 assists, and then Griffin Dorsey to round up the top five with 4 assists for this Houston Dynamo side. Best win of the season. I mean, I know Dynamo fans would easily say it's the 2-1 win that they had against the Galaxy, but I think besides the late heroic goal that they of course scored to knock the Galaxy to second position, they didn't really have a lot to play for up to that game, and in some way it was kind of almost a huge disadvantage the fact that they won that game because the team that they were going to face in the playoffs is not a favorable one. So instead, I'm going to go with the 4-1 win that they had against DC United on the road. We know this team was a very good road team this season. It was a good road team as well last season under Ben Olsen, and it kind of continued again. They absolutely thrashed DC in that game. Now, it does help the fact that DC were down to 9 men for part of this game as well, but the dominance that Houston shown on the road. I mean, this would be unthinkable a couple of years ago. This team used to be one of the worst team on the road, but the fact that these last couple of years they've done so much better on the road under Ben Olsen, it's kind of in shown in full force, especially in this game. Probably one of the best road performances they've ever put on in their club history. Now, worst loss of the season. Again, I know this might be recency bias, and this also could be a bias of me just simply attending this game in person, but it's got to be the 3-0 loss that they had against St. Louis. And again, when I attend this game in person, I know St. Louis was a team that was on a rise and they want to finish the season strong, but my goodness, what in the world happened in that game for the Houston Dynamo? Like they look nothing like a team that for a team that at that point was one of the best road team in the league. They did not do nothing against this St. Louis side, and it also doesn't help the fact that they also got a red card in that game, especially in the latter part of the game as well. But the fact that the Dynamo was that flat in that game against St. Louis, yeah, again that was a very unrecognizable Dynamo team. Almost a little bit of flashback of what the Dynamo used to be when they're playing on the road, which was a team that simply it's an automatic L every time the Dynamo play on the road because this has been considered to be one of the worst road team for a while now. Before Ben Olsen took over this job. Now, in terms of average attendance, we know the attendance have always been bad in Dynamo games. Though this season, despite the fact that it's the second worst once again, it did improve compared to last season. Last season, the attendance was like 15,000 plus. This time, it raised up to 17,038, and I have a feeling that attendance will continue to rise. Especially they're one of the team that gets to win the Messi sweepstake of Messi and friends coming to their stadium to play as a Western Conference team. But there's no doubt that the attendance wise, it still is a big problem. It's been one of the biggest mystery when it comes to MLS of why in the world does the Houston Dynamo don't have good attendance. It's not because the people in the Houston area don't like soccer. I mean, Houston is a city that not only it's big, but it's a city that definitely has a good soccer culture as well. And I know the Dynamo has been very bad for the last couple of years, and maybe that's kind of the reason why the attendance has been bad because with all the mismanagement that's gone wrong with this team, it's hard to try to win the team back. But if they continue to make playoff appearances and especially maybe even go deep into the playoffs again, no doubt fan interest could be there as well. Now, looking at MVP for this Houston Dynamo team, I'm going to go with Coco Karras here because, again, he's probably the most talented player on that Dynamo team. And according to the CONCACAF page, it seems like he's the most talented player in the region as well because he won the award for the most talented player and the best player in the CONCACAF region. And it kind of showed both during his time with Panama and also with the Houston Dynamo. There is no doubt that they're going to get a hefty amount of money for Coco Carrasquillo. There's a lot of teams in Europe that is looking to try to buy him outright, and we'll see whether or not when it's the appropriate time for the Dynamo to eventually cash in on Coco Carrasquillo and get a huge sum of money as a result of it. Disappointment. It's got to be Hector Herrera. I mean, what's kind of interesting is that I think last year I said Hector Herrera was the MVP of this team. what a season it's been made in terms of him going from MVP last season in my moving for a series to me labeling it as a huge disappointment. And really, Hector Herrera time with the Dynamo. I mean, it's very tough to judge whether or not if you can consider to be successful or not in terms of his time with this team. I mean, he had that incredible year that he had last season, but besides that, I mean, his 3 years it's been mostly down than actually good. And I will say that I won't label him as one of the worst ever because I've seen worse DP than what the Dynamo did get in terms of production for Hector Herrera, but this season, I mean, just a massive disappointment. It also kind of doesn't help when he has trouble in terms of staying healthy. I mean, he was out for a majority of the beginning of the season, and in some way, you kind of say that maybe he kind of rushed his way back too soon because he just never looked like the Hector Herrera kind of player that we saw last season compared to this season. And again, this kind of one of the reasons why the Dynamo, when it comes to their goal scoring and even their expectancy goal number and their underlying number, is not very good because their main number 10, the guy that they feast on in terms of unlocking the opposition defense, was just not himself, and also spend more time on the IR than actually on the pitch. Now, in terms of young player to watch, I'm gonna go with Lawrence Anelli, and I know he suffered a torn ACL. He's probably not going to be back with this team at the very minimum, probably in the latter part of this upcoming season. But from what I saw in terms of the short amount of times he was with the Dynamo, this kid is electric. I mean, this kid has a lot of potential. Now, obviously, coming back from a torn ACL, that's going to be very difficult to do, whether you're a young players or not. You're never going to look the same when you suffer a torn ACL. But I'm excited to see once he does get himself back to match fitness, how he's going to do. Because again, I know it's small sample size, but really just the limited sample size that he has when he was with the Dynamo before that torn ACL, he looked like he could be a star in the making. Now, what went right for this Houston Dynamo side? They continue to be a very strong road team. They were among four teams in the Western Conference that won 8 games this season, which is the most out of any team in the Western Conference. They also second in terms of least goals allow. Only the Seattle Sounders have allowed the fewest goals, and we know their back line is very strong. And it also helped when you have Steve Clark, who is probably one of the more underappreciated goalkeeper in this league. But in terms of the other thing that went wrong, well, they made the playoffs again. Again, playoffs seems like it's something that for a while that this is a team that simply it's almost like a pipe dream because of how much they've been near the bottom of the standings and in the doldrum of the Western Conference. But to get themselves back to being a playoff contender and a regular playoff appearance, that's got to feel good for Dynamo fans. But what doesn't feel good for Dynamo fans is the fact that, yeah, they got a first round exit. And again, the opponent that they faced in the first round, that was possibly the worst performance, the opponent that they could have faced. I mean, the Seattle Sounders had ownage over the Dynamo over the year, especially at Lumen Field as well. So this is no surprise that they got bounced as a result of that. And also not to mention, while Steve Clark is definitely a decent goalkeeper, a decent shot stopper, yeah, don't trust him when it comes to penalty kick situation, because whether it's we saw with the Dynamo losing in a PK shootout and Steve Clark looked pretty bad throughout that time, or even during his time with the Portland Timbers, Steve Clark never known to be a good penalty kick stopper. Hector Herrera again disappointing end with the club. I mean, I haven't even mentioned the spitting incident as well. And what's kind of interesting is that it feels like now Hector Herrera has the same situation that Clint Dempsey currently dealt with, where because of the fact that he has now left this league, he's probably gonna never fulfill the suspension that he of course are going to be handed. I mean, whoever decided to get Hector Herrera in the near future, or whichever MLS team to do, they got to be aware that yeah, he's gonna still have to serve that suspension because of that disgusting act in terms of spitting. I mean, he basically went Brian Vera in terms of that incident, and you never want to go full Brian Vera in that situation. And yeah, just after that, that was kind of the last straw for the club, that the club can't simply get in anymore, and they decided that yeah, they're not gonna uh, have him back for next season. And then, of course, as I mentioned, home form was definitely a problem, especially in the latter part of the season. I mean, the amount of points that they dropped at home, this used to be one of the best teams at home. And the reason why they were so good at home is because that Texas Heat and that Houston Heat is definitely a big home field advantage. A lot of teams have problems dealing with it, and that's why the Dynamo have been so good throughout the years at home. This season, it has not been the case. I mean, again, I don't know. It's just because of the style that they play that doesn't really fit well at home. They were not a great home team, which is something. Again, this is kind of what's weird about this Dynamo team. A couple of years ago, if you were told that this team would be better on the road compared to at home, that would be unthinkable. But now it's kind of almost reversed, where all their road form has been pretty good. Their home form has been a problem, and again, that was something that was not thinking that was possible with this team with the way that they've been playing very well at home for a long time. Even in these years that they were bad, they were still doing much better at home compared to they did this season as well. So moving forward for this Houston Dynamo team, obviously, they're going to get boatload of money when they do eventually move on from Coco Karaskia. But now the big question is that when he does decide to move on, and there's also definitely some other talent on this team that I think they could move on. Griffin Dorsey is another example of it. I think he could be sold off for a big amount of money as well. But that being said, if they are going to decide to move on from Karaskia, and especially with the way that I think Coco Karaskia definitely played more of an advanced role than we saw in the beginning of the season. That's kind of the reason why he really tally up his assist chart compared to what we saw last season. They need another creative player and a difference maker on that part. And in order to do so, they definitely have a DP spot open with Hector Herrera no longer with this club. But you just kind of had a sense that, there's a chance where they can buy down another DP spot. And one of the biggest albatross in terms of this team currently occupying a DP spot is Seba Ferreira. I mean, he has been considered to be a huge bust for this team. I mean, if you just now look what he did in this first season, he's been a huge disappointment for this Dynamo team. And again, I even said it's a big surprise that when he did moved on loan, I thought he wasn't going to be coming back. But yeah, there's no doubt that they really want to buy down that contract, and especially the amount that they had to pay for him was like somewhere over around $2 million. That is way too much to pay a guy that just never really fulfilled his potential compared to what he see in the first season. And then I think the other thing that people might not note this that could be a big talking point even as soon as near the next off season is the goalkeeping situation because Steve Clark is not getting any younger. He is definitely getting that time where goalkeepers they definitely have a longer lifespan compared to outfield player, but Steve Clark is definitely getting up to it. And while last season he didn't really show any signs of any fatigue or starting to show signs of maybe getting washed. I'm kind of interesting to see whether or not if he does show a bit of a regression, whether or not if they're already thinking about maybe replacing him. I mean, some people will say well it's gonna be Jimmy Maurer the one that's probably gonna replace him because they just bought him this off season, but Jimmy Maurer is 36 years old, and he's more of a backup option for most part than he is as a starter. So I don't think he's going to be the solution in the future. This could be very interesting to see what the Dynamo would do in terms of goalkeeping situation, even though some people would be thinking that it's untenable to think Steve Clark is going to get replaced anytime soon. I think he's going to be a regular starter, but in case if he does have a dip in form, and especially with him getting a little older, there will definitely be that discussion of them maybe potentially replace their veteran goalkeeper. And then lastly, just a bonus in there is definitely hoping Ponce can continue his upright projectile or be a difference maker. That's what they really hope for because last season, Ezekiel Ponce he kind of did okay. I think he kind of did what you expect a player coming into a new league where they're not going to be a hit immediately. It's going to take time, and that's what the Dynamo is hoping that is the case. And if he can continue to do so, especially as he continued to play with this team, he got much better as the season goes along. That would continue heading into next season as well, and we'll see another player that is a good example of if you give them enough time, they're going to develop, and they definitely finally have the answer in terms of that number 9 spot. They have not had an answer in terms of that number 9 spot for the past couple of years, besides Seba Ferreira having that incredible season a couple of years ago. But either way, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure to see the like, smash the subscribe button. As always, let me know in the comments below if you're a Dynamo fan. What do you think is the MVP, disappointment, young player to watch? What went right? What went wrong? And moving forward, how is this team going to look heading into next season? But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.